Hello, my name is Vicky. I'm a speech and language therapist, and today I'm going to talk to you about selective mutism. So selective mutism is a condition that you may have heard of before. It's considered a phobia, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, how it's diagnosed, and also some of the intervention methods that might be used if a child is diagnosed with selective mutism. So the diagnosis of selective mutism can be done by a speech and language therapist. And here is a little overview of what we look for before we diagnose selective mutism. So the essential features that we talked about in the diagnostic manual criteria, there is a consistent pattern of talking or not talking with certain people under certain conditions. Even when it's clearly in their interest to speak, they do not speak because they can't. The child experiences a sensation of freezing and their voice gets stuck or it won't come out. And you may observe this as an outsider by seeing body tension, blank facial expression, or you can sense a sense of helplessness from the child. They might hide behind their parents on the first meeting you. They may not respond at all to direct questions or try to answer their parent rather than answer you. So those are some of the things that we might look for. Selective mutism can exist alongside other diagnoses, but the consistent pattern of mutism should not be better explained by other diagnoses in order for there to be a diagnosis of selective mutism. Here are some other diagnostic criteria or diagnostic features. There's marked avoidance of situations when talking is expected. The avoidance strategies can become very creative and very persistent. Children may avoid triggering fear response by consciously opting for silence. So they may choose silence, but that's to avoid triggering the response of the feeling of fear. There is a specific and predictable pattern of talking and not talking, which has persisted for more than 1 month or 2 in a new environment. And the pattern differs between individual children and between different people the child knows, but is consistent for the child themselves. So 2 different children with selective mutism will have different patterns, but that pattern is consistent for each one of them. And the pattern can be dependent on who is present and who might overhear. So for example, a child with selective mutism might speak very freely to their parents, but if someone is within earshot or in the room, they may go silent. Marked contrast between talking and interacting freely with those in their comfort zone and silence avoidance with other people. There is a visible freeze, so their body becomes tense when the child becomes aware of someone who's outside their comfort zone. And there's a preference for nonverbal and alternative means of communication, even if that makes them different. And the use of nonverbal and alternative means of communication is minimal or effortful with people who appear to want them to talk. So adults who say things like, "Why won't you talk to me? Why are you so quiet? Oh, you never talk to me." So if there's an expectation of the child to talk, then they may not even want to try to communicate with that person who's placing the expectation on them. They will deny talking, stop talking, or reject praise when they fear their success will lead to an expectation to talk. So if a child with selective mutism becomes comfortable and starts talking in an environment, but if a big deal is made out of that act of speaking, they may then stop talking or say they didn't talk or reject praise because there's now too much attention and it seems like there's going to be more of an expectation for them to talk. There are different presentations of selective mutism. There's high-profile selective mutism. They don't speak at all to certain people or in certain situations. And there is also low-profile selective mutism, where they speak a little bit when absolutely necessary, but they don't spontaneously initiate or make requests. Or on the speaking habits form, they can be reported to be someone who will respond if asked a question directly, but they will never initiate. And there can also be selective mutism that occurs alongside things like speech and language delays or impairment, English as a second language, or other diagnoses like autism spectrum disorders, social anxiety disorder, or even other major concerns around the medical and environmental and emotional background for the child. We must not confuse selective mutism with traumatic mutism, psychogenic voice disorders, or reluctant speakers who have not developed selective mutism but can present like they are a lot quieter or a lot shyer. So they may be unwary in unfamiliar situations, they may be overwhelmed, and they may not understand the language used or lack confidence in their expressive language skills, or they may need permissions and reassurance to speak freely, or they may not have an interest in the topic of social interaction. So it's important for reluctant speakers to ensure an anxiety-free communication environment, otherwise they will avoid talking and selective mutism could develop.